Welcome, Rebels, to another video where we talk tactically about Star Wars Destiny. I'm your host, Gray, and today we're going to talk about some of the Legacy spoilers that FFG gave us back on October 27th. Old news, I know, but between the content creators showdown, work, Halloween, being sick, and some personal projects, it's been tough for me to get you these videos in a timely fashion. But all that aside, we've got a few great cards to go over in this video, so let's do that, and then we can all get back to our regularly scheduled lives. So all the cards that I'm going to be covering today come from the article on FFG's website entitled Your First Steps. A few of these cards we've already discussed, like Boba and Luke, so we're going to skip right to the new stuff, and we're going to begin by talking about the new Slave 1. This ship is very nice. First off, it's only 3 resources to get it into play, and it has a really great die. 2 range damage, 2 indirect damage, 3 indirect damage for 1 resource, 1 shield, 1 resource, and a blank, of course. And it has a power action, which reads, reroll one of your yellow dice. You may remove an opponent's die showing a value equal to the value showing on the die that you just rerolled. So that's a reroll and some potential removal. So smart plays here could really maximize this particular reroll. But of course, everything is up to chance when you're playing a game of dice. You just have to kind of do the math, figure the odds out, and decide which die should I reroll. Or maybe you're just rerolling it because you just want extra damage, right? And in looking at this card, I think this Slave 1 or version of Slave 1 isn't really a replacement for the older one from Spirit of Rebellion. In fact, I think it's just a different ship in general. I think it goes in a different kind of deck. And I love the thematic indirect damage here as well. Whenever I hear those iconic Slave 1 blasters firing off like pew, 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 all I can think of is, whatever they hit, it's going to hurt. But they're not really the most targeted form of damage. It's kind of like spread damage, But still, I love that sound, And the indirect damage side falls in line with what we're expecting out of the whole Legacy set. And with this being a quick drop in the table in Yellow Villain, I can see its damage sides being paired with perhaps some big modded indirect damage. Overall, it looks like this Slave 1 could be a force to be reckoned with if vehicles are going to have at least as much impact on the game in 2 months after the release of Legacies as they do right now. And I know that's not saying much, but again, we haven't seen the whole set, and we're looking at these things sort of in a vacuum. But if this vehicle existed right now in the EAW meta, it would probably see play. So right off the bat, these wrist rockets are going to cost you as much to put into play as that Slave 1 ship. And that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. But since this is science fiction, let's just kind of roll with it. At a glance, the first thing I think of when I see wrist rockets, aside from badass weaponry, is how it's going to interact with Django and maybe even fast hands. And I can totally see you just fast handsing 4 indirect damage for 1. Off and activate for him, and it makes me a little scared, but mostly kind of sick. Besides that, its special is absolutely insane. You can do 2 damage or 4 damage for 1 resource, and it can be to 1 character. You can do 4 damage, or you can do 2 damage to 2 different characters. So the options here are pretty great, and what you're looking at is essentially 2 4 damage sides for a resource, right? And it seems really expensive to some, but I don't think that this weapon is one to be underestimated. 4 is a really coveted damage number in Destiny. And the plays with this card, they look like they could be pretty good. So, and I guess that we can also mention that it has a base 2 range side as well as a discard and a resource. But let's be fair here. It's got 50% damage sides, and they convert out to 2 damage sides guaranteed, or 2 4 damage for 1 resource sides, 1 guaranteed and 1 optional. So it's just great, albeit expensive. But what's really apparent here too is that the power creep on weapon upgrades is very real right now. So next, let's take a look at the 2 events and the battlefield from Boba's starter that we were shown. And the first event we saw is Locked and Loaded, which acts like an It's a Trap for any color dice and requires you to spot a red character. And it's only for indirect damage, okay? And this card could be bonkers good. And I think its cost of 1 might actually make it worthwhile to use with swiftness. Remember Wedge and the resistance bomber, which could make 9 indirect damage. Yeah, for 2 resources, plus whatever it costs to resolve that stuff if it has a resource cost. I don't remember now. And my opponent can't interact with my dice. Well, I'm going to be all in on that plan for sure. And the second red event they showed us was Crash Landing, which is essentially a cannon fodder that converts the value on the die into indirect damage. And what I like most about this card is it's neutral, okay, which now gives heroes the ability to utilize something like cannon fodder outside of Blue's old heroism card, or heroism, however you want to say that. So this is going to be a great addition to decks looking to control damage. And I expect that with the shields gaining traction by the day, this will actually be one of the better removal options for hero and maybe even for villain, because it's going to allow you to take 3 concentrated damage and say, okay, my 3 characters each take 1, and you can throw it into shield. So that all sounds pretty cool to me. All right, so let's take a look at the battlefield coming with Boba's starter, which is Arid Wasteland. And I got to tell you, it has the potential to be a really annoying battlefield. Against decks that are running tight on resources and that don't claim very often, this is going to be a really, really rough one for you. It's not going to allow you to carry over a resource into the next round to start off with 3. This could be a problem. And I suspect there's going to be some claim tension that arises from the use of this battlefield, especially when used against blue hero. I think even red hero and red villain might have a lot of trouble with this battlefield, at least as we currently look at it now. But you know, logistics is still a thing in the meta, and both red factions have some options here, right? Red villain also has prepare for war to help get around this. Yellow has truce, you know. So there are ways to sort of generate resources on the fly or whatever, but in general, this battlefield is going to be a nuisance, but depending on what else we get, it may not even see that much play. All right, so let's take a look at what's coming in the hero starter alongside the new Luke and the new Han. And the first card up is Force Focus, and this is a new force power that's only costing 2, like Force Training. And you also need to spot a blue character to play it, just like Force Training. Those teachable force moments, right? Starting with the die sides, we've got a shield, we've got 2 1-resource sides, and 2 special sides. And I guess that's kind of everything blue hero wants to move fast, right? Shields, resource, hero, special, maybe melee, and get out of the turn, right? And the specialness reads that you can turn one of your dice to any side. Then, if you want, you can reveal a blue card from your hand to turn an opponent's die to any side. Well, that's definitely an upside for you and a downside for your opponent. It's actually a bit like the 2-player game Poe Dameron special in a way, but without needing to reveal a card, and that special also gives you a shield. So, and this has better odds to roll itself, and it only costs 2, so that kind of seems like it's pretty well balanced against each other. You know, obviously Poe can turn 2 of your own dice. It doesn't have to be one of yours and one of your opponents. You know, it can turn anything. The problem that I have with this card is that blue hero isn't really a great control archetype. I mean, there's Force Misdirection. With Kanan and Jedi Instructor now, you know, it's getting better at controlling a larger variety of dice now that blue hero has some more range damage stuff in the mix. But I'm not really sure that this card gets a spot just for stuff like that. I mean, it seems kind of weak to me for heroes, but again, it's a neutral card, so for villains, this could be a little bit better. And I say that because blue villain sort of has this blank removal stuff going on with Feel Your Anger and, you know, trying to capitalize off of stuff like blanks, even with a regular anger card, right? In fact, you could think of a deck that has a strong die manipulation theme that maybe would include this, and you can holocron it out, right? And maybe just plink away very slowly with stuff like Power the Dark Side and Meditate and Force Focus and Feel Your Anger and all that stuff. I mean, that particular deck type has never been super strong, but the more cards you add into the mix, the more it improves over time, and the closer you get to someone really unlocking the potential of that particular theme, right? And there was one other card here, and contrary to this one's weird applications, the Heirloom lightsaber holds absolutely no punches back, and this is just a good, straight upgrade. It's a lightsaber that we've kind of always wanted. It stands on its own with 3 resolvable melee damage sides, instead of all that mixed resolve with black sides and blue side stuff that we see in every other lightsaber up to this point. And the highlight, of course, is that the 3 melee on it is free to resolve, so there's no resource cost, finally, you know? And that's pretty good stuff here. This is the card that finally replaces the old lightsaber completely. I mean, unless you're really banking on unblockable damage, I think this is probably the one, you know? And the best part about it all is, heck, it's another lightsaber, right? So it's giving us more options for lightsaber pull, and the Force is strong plays and all that fancy stuff that blue villains and blue hero decks like to do. This might be one of the best lightsabers yet, and it also gives redeploy as long as it's attached to the blue character, right? So how do you beat that? How do you not give this thing a spot in your deck, right? At least to try it out. I think it's a real winner. Now, we said earlier that I don't think that the new Slave One replaces the old Slave One, but I do think that this Millennium Falcon is hands down better than the old Millennium Falcon, and let's review why. First off, its die to me is just better than the old Falcon, unless you're trying to discard cards, right? Yes, this one has a blank, okay, but the special in the old Falcon was essentially a blank anyway. It was never really good or that useful. If you paid $5 to get a vehicle like that out, you want something significant out of its die, not to replay an old yellow event in your in your discard pile. So in addition to that, the estimated value on this die without considering the blank is over 2. Okay, and it has 50% damage side, so there we go again. One of which is a 4 indirect damage for 1 resource, right? And the other 2 are nothing to scoff at. You got a 2 ranged and a 3 ranged as well. So resolving any of that, in my opinion, will be worthwhile at 4 resource costs the first time you drop it out. Also, we need to talk about its ability, okay? After you activate the Falcon, you can activate a character. What? Like, this thing has a reverse lead by example built into it. So if this thing hits the table in a game with Maz on the table, and you partnership, you activate Maz, you activate the Falcon, you can then activate another character, then resolve 2 dice for Maz's ability, then pay 1 to take the extra action for partnership and resolve more dice. And this is like next level action cheating for Hero, and that's really, really good. And Impulsive is an event that they showed us. It's less impressive than the Falcon, okay, but it manages to still be a very good card. It is the perfect card for those mixed damage situations that are going to be coming into play more and more as we see ranged and indirect damage on the same cards, and likely going to be in the same decks over and over. And I'll read the card out for you, okay? It's a hero only yellow 0 cost event, and it has ambush on it, and it says resolve 1 of your dice. You know, it's got Chewbacca in the artwork, so you know, in theory they're like, well, you got that annoying Chewbacca side out, melee side out, maybe you resolve that, and then he's got arranged with something else, and you can resolve that with the ambush action. Speed up your turns a little bit more, right? You might even use it in a deck that actually runs Wookiees, or you know, any mixed damage deck. Actually, I think is kind of what you're looking at with this card, right? And I like this card a lot, you know, because it's another die removing card, and it's a speed card, and it's an ambush card. You can give Han a shield if you really care about that, right? Maybe it goes in Han Ray. Maybe that's, I just had that idea. Maybe that's where, you know, where it goes. But the problem with the die resolving cards is that you have to wonder if there's ever going to be a deck slot going forward for those cards anymore. You know, like Collateral Damage is a really good card. You know, resolve range damage, and then steal a resource, you know. And that card is good, but it doesn't find its deck spot all the time, you know. And this card is good, but it doesn't always have, it might not have a deck slot because of other cards that are coming out that are just better. But it is 0 cost, so again, you're going to look at it. It's probably going to be top tier. And honestly, that's really my only concern with it, because otherwise, it's actually a very, very good card on paper. You just got to wonder if it's actually going to be better than a good card in practice. All right, we've got just 2 more cards to discuss here, folks. And the first one is Maz's Vault. And this is a card that I've got to admit I'm a little afraid of. So everyone gets an extra resource during the upkeep. Now, I know this isn't some counterplay to all those local garrisons we see out there, so it makes me wonder if there's like a new version of that coming that FFG thinks is actually going to see play, or whether they just want to print a bonkers card like this that affects game balance significantly. Okay. And when I say that, I don't mean objective game balance. I mean the 2 resource refresh now being a 3 resource refresh, and how that's going to drive the game to go faster, starting with the turn after this is played. Now, the interesting bit about it is how it opens up the game simply by being on the table. I don't think any other card has such a huge impact on both sides of the table and is a constant. Okay. This isn't like your truce scenario either, where, you know, you take a risk to get ahead, because remember, you can use truce after they claim to give them a resource, and it's basically like you got a resource and you got an ambush card and an ambush action, which you wouldn't care about, right? But no, this keeps the field actually level. It just on a higher floor. Okay. The 3 resource floor to start out. Now I can imagine that there's going to be ways to build into a deck like this. So like utilizing a higher cost curve than normal, with an emphasis perhaps on 3 cost upgrades earlier in the game, maybe even some 4 cost upgrades to sort of make things, make yourself creep the power a little faster in your upgrades. Now you'd have to hard mulligan for this card perhaps in a deck like that, but remember, you have about a 52% chance to get it in your opening hand, which isn't that bad. So it's very possible to do, but then the question boils down to, is it competitive enough? And I can't imagine that it would be, but hey, that's just me. And what I will say about this lastly is I'm looking forward to see who's going to be crazy enough to try to build that deck around it. Hint, I'm probably going to try. But I think there are some craftier deck builders and deck brewers out there than I am. So now, last but not least, we've got the battlefield from Luke's starter to discuss, and it's the Outer Rim Outpost on Nalhutta. And its claim effect is gain 1 resource and draw a card. And just to answer a couple of the common questions, no, I don't think it's going to replace Moisture Farm straight up. And yes, the draw a card effect is actually good. The combination of these effects in a single claim is actually quite eye-opening, and the potential is, you get to see an additional card and decide whether you need it for next round, which gives you a little bit of, I guess, pseudo card advantage in that sense. Often you might just keep the card and then you're going to draw to the rest of 5, but in a match where maybe you're ahead and you want to dig through your deck a little bit, you get to skinny your deck by 1 card. So, the claim essentially is helping you thin your deck just that little bit, right? And that's usually good, as more often than not, you might still be searching for your power card. And as the game progresses, that element of the claim actually loses its potency a bit, but that's okay, because you're still getting a resource too, right? So I feel like this one will actually see some play, especially in decks that want to claim really fast, or that want to cycle cards, and decks that kind of just like money. And I can already think of a few decks, even right now in our meta, that this would work for right now if it was a legal card. And that's a wrap, folks. FFG has been really generous with the news lately, and I know that I've said in the past that it all feels very overwhelming, and it kind of still does. There's just so much going on in this game right now, and on the contrary, I've heard a lot of people say that they're already waiting for the new meta, with Legacies, because the current one just seems kind of boring to them. Now, I don't hold that personal opinion. I don't agree with that, but teach their own is what I always say. But I also want to say that if you're one of those people who is bored with the meta, I'd say give it a few weeks to see where things land. We've got this Content Creator Showdown happening right now, which hopes to showcase a few interesting decks, hopefully. And people are always brewing stuff on the internet or at your local store. So really, don't be too down about it if you can help it. Stuff is always taking shape around you, sort of like the Force. Just imagine that all the popular deck builders out there right now are trying to influence the midi-chlorians to create great decks. Something like that anyway. All right, but before I get too deep into prequel lore, I should probably stop this video. I hope you enjoyed my overview of the new spoilers. I continue personally to like what I see with the new set with each and every reveal, and I already think it's going to be a very good set, much better than Empire at War at least. That's what my gut really tells me. And the thing is, now they've shown their hand with the starters, and there are a few cards also being spoiled out there by the content creators as well. I know that the Jedi Trials just got a few, so you might check that out over at their Facebook page, because apparently we're already in spoiler season again. Like, we're right back in the mix, right? It's like so much to take in. But personally, I'm going to try to get another video out to you on Tuesday at the latest, but I may even have some time this weekend. I'm going to see about that because I'm trying to set up round 2 of the Content Creator Showdown with Dan from 3 Men Meta, or whichever one of the 3 I'm going to end up going up against. And that may be the videos that you get next Tuesday. It might be 3 videos, it might be 5 if I go the distance, so we'll see. I just feel like I need a little bit of R&R after this busy week for me personally. So until we see each other next time, don't step in Bantha Poodoo, avoid dangerous thugs, and may the Force be with you. Writes this stuff.